Welcome. This is David Bowles, Human Meme. Today's topic, rescuing the district. The treacherous insurrection that stained our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, leaves us as a nation divided, and me, as a person who used to live in and who still loves the district, distraught. Decades ago, in the summer of 1987, my girlfriend and I at the time, she would later become my beautiful wife within a year, we uprooted ourselves from the braided prairies of Nebraska and from the twisted cornfields of Iowa to find a better life together, eastward ho, and jointly driven by fear and the joy of the undiscovered, we drove away from where we were from, and we faced the rising sun of the United States East Coast in a stuffed and packed, russet-colored 1978 Ford Fairmont Futura to find a new life as one in Washington, D.C. Yes, Washington, the District of Columbia. And it was no secret at the time that our Midwestern friends and family, most of them, warned us against moving to D.C., the district. Oh, they were worried because D.C. was urban, and as they said, that's where all the black people lived, and that it was a split city, split between deep poverty and unbelievable riches. But our minds were set to move, and we had no real plan except to get in a car and escape. And we did. We ended up living together in a sort of actor's flop house that was incredibly cheap and happened to be situated in the lovely Capitol Hill neighborhood near Independence Avenue. Our housemates in the row house were completely insane and transient and wildly talented, and we loved them and the neighborhood, and we were proud to be able to say we lived 2 doors down from the great and legendary Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. And we would often walk by Tip O'Neill's house, usually every day, just hoping to catch a glimpse of him, hoping to say hi, and to offer our kind wishes and a good old-fashioned Midwestern hello. We never had the chance to say hi to Tip. He died in 1994. Now, our neighborhood where we lived, Capitol Hill, was monuments. Real-life monuments. We were just a couple of blocks away from the Capitol building and the Washington Monument and the mall, and the Smithsonian. One of my first jobs was working at Arena Stage, and that took me near the Jefferson Memorial, every day looking at the beauty. Working later at Ford's Theater gave me many hours alone looking at all that dried and preserved Abraham Lincoln blood in his clothes in the Ford Museum. Another job of mine at the Kennedy Center took me to many other landmarks, including the Lincoln Memorial. The entire city of Washington, D.C. is shining and absolutely majestic. Washington, D.C. is a beautiful city. At least, it used to be that way back then, as I remember it. We haven't really been back since we left a year later to take up our newer lives in New York City. But, my human meme friend, back in the summer of '87, the district was stunning. We first arrived in town right as the sun was setting, and the trees were in full bloom, and we were stuck on the Beltway, looping endlessly, looking for a way off and a way into the heart of the city. and we finally ended up driving right next to the White House, which you could do at that time. And there was no doubt to us that D.C. welcomed us, that two bohunks from the Midwest were touring around Washington, D.C. in a dying Ford Futura, hoping to call this new land our new home, at least for a little while. D.C. is a small, closed town. Most everyone is from somewhere else. Everyone is renewed every day. Everyone there is your neighbor. We quickly learned that in D.C., the subway is called the metro, and the bus is called the bus. While later we learned, upon arriving in New York City, that the subway is called the subway, and the bus is called the metro. In D.C., we lived and breathed all the great food and friendship found in our Eastern Market metro stop. And my human meme friend, it was pretty amazing to write down your home address as Washington, D.C., zip code 2003. You just never quite got used to the binding of your now with the history of what was in that city. And few people know that Washington, D.C. is actually located on your map below the Mason-Dixon line. And so that technically makes the District of Columbia a southern city. And I've spent some time in the South, and D.C. definitely does have that small-town southern charm that immediately makes you feel like you belong and that no one is a stranger. Finding jobs in the district was alarmingly easy, and those jobs paid really well. You could work 3 gigs a day if you wanted to at that time. That city truly never sleeps. There was always something that needed to be done or written or faxed or cleaned or fed or catered to. Hey, D.C. is a party town, an elite party town with money to burn. And if you happen to be in the arts, you could feed yourself every single day just by breezing into one of the many parties being held every night, and you would eat really well. And at least, well, back then anyway, you could pretty much come and go as you pleased, anywhere you wanted to say you belonged, and you were in. You were welcomed. Today, right now, and probably from now on, probably not so much of that. I can imagine it's a little harder to get free food in the district if you're a starving artist in Washington, D.C. And I know all of that is gone now. Washington, D.C. is now locked down in a sorry state, and will likely remain that way forever. But that's the price we pay for freedom and democracy. Our locks get bigger, and our bunkers are dug deeper, because the world only gets louder and meaner as the days pass. It's too late to rewind into kindness and quiet. The dangerous, savage days are upon us. And who among us wouldn't mourn the good old days of D.C., the golden days in the district, when your entire life was before you and no longer behind you, and when you could drive right up to the White House and wave a Midwestern hello from the curb? Who wouldn't mourn the steel blockades we now see installed on Independence Avenue, pocking the street you used to call home, after you left behind where you were from? Who wouldn't mourn the threat to life and liberty in a small town, a small southern town, that built you in a year, and that has thrived in your memory for 3 decades? And yes, I know, I get it. We want progress. We want community. But when the price of those wants relies upon the conceding of wishes, well, the world changes just a little bit, and the mind spins just a little harder against the new reality. And you are left wandering and wondering into the next abyss, not wanting to dismiss that what you once had, what you once held in your hand, doesn't exist anymore. Does not exist except in the remember when moment, and in the did you know reckoning of human kindness. And then it all prolapses into yearning for the momentary to become the permanent, pitiful being. And you are left looking for the joy of the human condition, looking for the missing promise of joy that your whole life is ahead of you, hanging there just beyond the horizon, waiting for you in unrendered promise and preformed expectation. And yes, that joy is and must be a shareable commodity, a rescuable thing that leaps from one side of the Mason-Dixon line in order to enrapture and love the other side. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.